back in due course on the implications, including costs of any consultation to introduce fluoride to Anihang's water supply. And C, we request the Chair of the Committee, on behalf of the Council, write to the Minister of Health to reinforce the local government New Zealand position that fluoridation be under the jurisdiction of government. So,
point of order, Mr. Chairman.
What's the point of order?
what's the point of order?
It's a number.
We have another presenter,
Sorry?
but that's not a point of order. My
It isn't.
concern,
Rule it out.
but I'm just bringing
Ruling on
that to your
point of order,
attention.
Mr. Chairman?
My concern is that I did not think it was possible to put motions such as that without a report.
Didn't worry about that in your own committee.
no.
You don't worry about that in your own committee.
Well, I think I had to...
Through you, Mr. Chair, is it possible to avoid interjections?
Yes.
No.
Well, I think...
And that's not a point of order either. It's your chairmanship, sir.
Yeah, okay. I think that it's... the second part is... I'm happy about that. The point that you make, I do have a concern about the third part in relation to the writing to the Minister of Local Government, because we haven't really, there's no paper on that. So,
if I could speak to those.
well, you can speak to me in relation to Part C, as to how I'm going to justify including that in the motion.
Point of order, Mr.
Through
Chair.
you, Mr. Chair, I haven't finished with my point of order.
What is the point of order?
Point of order?
And I'd seek advice from the officers, because we as councillors have been directed with some stringency that we should not be asking for reports willy-nilly, certainly on the basis of presentations alone. Now, that's the...
Yes, sorry?
Really, it's becoming impossible to speak in this chamber, Mr. Chairman, because of constant interjections.
Yeah, if you just let Councillor Walker...
I was just asking
Yeah.
for an opinion from an officer around this matter, because that is the directive I understand that we've been given as councillors.
Okay, well, we'll take the point you make. We will leave this on the table, and we will hear the next presenter, and then we will we'll come back to this. Okay. I'm sorry. Thank you, Richard, and we'll include thanks to you.
Thank you.
In the motion. Thank you for coming in. Okay. We'll now ask Mr. Kane Titchener, to come forward and speak. And as I said to the other presenters, you have 5 minutes.
Thanks, that's 15, is it? Thanks. Look, you don't bring a pea shooter to a water fight. I've got the clinical evidence from 2009. There's no difference in caries between fluoridated and non-fluoridated areas, but there is an increase in dental fluorosis. So I'll just leave this here. I'll send this all to you if you'd like. Good morning, councillors and Māori board members. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. What I would like to share is that what is used to fluoridate is not pharmaceutical grade fluoride. The US Public Health Service and Ministry of Health optimal target concentrations are not in alignment, and there is real evidence of harm. Oh, pointless. Someone give me some guidance. Someone give me some guidance here. Can someone give me some guidance?
It should go. It's not going.
Right-hand arrow.
Yep, that's what I'm doing. Here we go. Fluoridation began in the swinging 60s when Formica was all the rage, asbestos was freely used, and dentists and doctors still advocated the use of cigarettes to calm the nerves. Could the science have changed? According to Watercare, 700 tonne of hazardous fluoride is added to Auckland's shared public water supply annually. Since that's 50 years, that's 30,000 tonne. The source of fluoride used to fluoridate is not pharmaceutical grade fluoride. This is directly from the Water New Zealand Good Practice Guide. Hydrofluorosilicic acid is produced as a co-product of the manufacture of the phosphate fertiliser process. There's no conspiracy about this, and this is completely agreed with the Ministry of Health. The Ministry of Health can spin it whichever way they like, but this is a hazardous acid. Last month, a $2 billion settlement was reached between the US Environmental Protection Agency and the Mosaic Fertiliser Company. The EPA accused the Mosaic Company of improper storage and disposal of waste. This is the acid that is being added to the water supply. Onianga has never been fluoridated. A referendum in 2001 returned 66% of voters opposed to fluoridation. At the time, Metro Water was actually contacting 2,000 households if there was going to be an exposure to fluoridated water from a planned maintenance shutdown. Please see the press release that I've handed out to you from the US Public Health Service. In April 2015, I contacted all councillors about the new US recommended single target of 0.7 part per million. The Ministry of Health official story is that Auckland Council is altering the levels to the optimal level. So the optimal level apparently isn't as optimal as first thought. Is it 0.7? Is it 0.8? Is it 0.9? Or is it 1 part per million? Well, according to the US, it is a single target of 0.7 parts per million. Please now see the OIA response from Peter Dunn that I've also handed out. What is the Ministry of Health's rationale to continue the range of 0.7 to 1 part per million? Now, all the focus is on concentration, but the fact is, it is the dose and the dosage that is important. How much are individuals consuming, and what is the size of those individuals? If you look at the bottle on the left on the screen there, you've got pharmacy-grade fluoride made from fluoride tablets, which you can buy for $12. This is dissolvable, and it says, do not use in a fluoridated area. The warning labels on this bottle, if you mix this to 1 litre, it says pregnant women should drink nil, children under 3 should drink nil. There are maximum requirements up to an adult. Adults should only be drinking 1 litre of this pharmacy-grade fluoride. You look at Auckland's fluoridated water, that's your water that you're fluoridating. There are no limits at all. Chemically, it's exactly the same. We've sent this to the Ministry of Health for a please explain, and they can't come back with an answer. Fluoride dose, this is really important as well. Breastfed babies are receiving 0.004 part per million. Nothing. Bottled fed babies, that's infant formula and Auckland fluoridated water, 200 times more fluoride. Hypothyroidism. Earlier this year, this peer-reviewed study on thyroid function and fluoridation was published. It showed a 30% increase in the underactive thyroid function for women at 0.3 part per million and a 60% increase in underactive thyroid function at 0.7 part per million. Again, we fluoridate at a range of 0.7 to 1 part per million. The Ministry of Health, under an OIA, have said they have not completed any original studies of fluoridated water and thyroid function. This is who you're taking your guidance off. So I'm asking you to request the CEO of Watercare to reduce the target level to 0.7 parts per million. Forget this silly idea to have a referendum in Onianga, because the people of Onianga know about fluoride. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions, Mr. Titchener? Councillor Walker?
Could you provide us with the links to the information sources that you've described?
Absolutely,
Kane?
yes, absolutely.
And I would hope that our officers pick up on those if there is to be any reporting on the subject.
We've already had that information.
Thank you, Mr. Titchener.
Or just-
Oh,
Have a
Councillor
question?
Dunn?
Question?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Councillor Peterson?
Thank you, Mr. Titchener. I'm just, a lot of the information, or most of the information I've received from you, I've always got the impression you were against fluoridation, but you just said in your presentation that you wanted us to request Watercare reduce the amount of fluoride. So you're okay with fluoride as long as it's at a level that you
I'd like you
feel
to end,
is...
I'd like you to end fluoridation right now, to put a call through and just tell them to turn the tap off. But what I'm saying is, why are we not following the US example and reducing our fluoride levels to 0.7 part per million.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Darby?
So just to follow that, that's your main request here, other than to follow the 2001 referendum where 66% opposed fluoridation and only hung a not 50-50. So just in terms of that 0.7, I've read the information that's come out of the Public Health Service where they have instructed all authorities in the US.
What they've done is they've given a recommendation. So water utilities can take this up, but if it's a recommendation, because of the higher level, there's 40% incidence of dental fluorosis in the US, okay? Now, unlike Richard, I've got concerns about dental fluorosis. It costs thousands of dollars to fix. Now, if this was ever to become a bigger issue, the legal liability on dental fluorosis alone is massive.
Okay, so I spoke to Mr. Ravine at a meeting recently about this recommendation of the American Public Health Service, which has not been picked up here, though my understanding is that the Ministry of Health in New Zealand is required to be in a constant review of the literature, but they haven't got around to that at this stage in New Zealand. But Mr. Ravine said there's to me, it's something that they could consider, and this is just very informal, but he said that they have a minimum requirement of 0.7, and that one of the risks for them is if their concentration added to the water is at 0.7 only, they could fall below. Yep. So would you be willing for a range that is 0.7 to, I don't know, 0.75 or whatever is reasonable to protect their responsibility to meet the 0.7 standard?
So we need to reduce it as much as possible, whatever, within the ranges to try and pull that down. So there's a huge difference between 1 part per million and 0.7 part per million. There's not a big difference between 0.7 and 0.75. I agree, yeah.
Councillor Walker, you have another question?
Yeah, it's just further to the question that Councillor Darby raised. My understanding is that fluoride's quite different to chlorine. Chlorine's lost because it actively scavenges bugs and the like, and effectively it dissipates. Fluoride, on the other hand, I think is relatively stable, isn't it?
So when
is it not possible to have a very accurate dose of fluoride in the water, which is what they're doing in the US? Is that not possible?
I mean that's the only good thing that they can do with fluoridation is actually get the concentration quite correct. So I'll just pick up on the dose concentration. The concentration is what they put in the water. The dose is what people are drinking, and individual responses are not being monitored on that.
Thank you. Other questions?
Yeah,
What's that, Councillor Cashmore?
it's one thing I haven't looked at or considered is, and it's just come to me. So fluoride is a extract from the fertiliser manufacturing process. Does the quality, degree of efficacy of the fluoride vary from the sources of that fertiliser? If it's phosphate, is it different? If it's Nauru, different from RPR from Satura or something like that? So is the American phosphate manufacturing process delivering a different fluoride, say, to the New Zealand one? That's what I'm asking.
The different companies have got different levels of fluoride. They've also taken it from the aluminium smelters. So they've got a bit of uranium and radium in there as well. So, and also lead. So they're only very small amounts, but they're still in there depending on where you source it from. And that's what you're putting in the water.
So potentially the 0.07 or whatever it was would have variances depending on the nationality and of source of the fluoride.
The concentration would be the same, so they can pull that out. So in the process of the hydrofluorosilicic acid, the only refinement is removing the silica. That's the only refinement. Then they get the concentration at that level, and then they put the concentration through.
Thank you. Other questions? We'll go back to...
Can I just ask a question of Mr. Kimpton at this stage?
yes.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Kimpton, we've got two presentations here, and they're in parts. One presentation is asking for us to make a decision to fluoride water, and the other is saying don't do that, and there's various arguments there. And then there's a third request for this body to ask some questions of water care around that 0.7 to 0.1 range. I'm not one to put up motions and just seek another body of reports, and I really want some guidance from you here as an executive officer on how we could intelligently approach this without just reactive on the day, and to be informed in our decision making, because there's various arguments being put here.
Certainly. So what I suggest is that, and I talked to the Chief Executive Water Care this morning as well. So as an information paper, I think Water Care would be agreeable to providing us background as to the current fluoridation process and how they manage the concentration of fluoride added to the water. So that would give you context around both the maybe to source, but also how they handle where they sit within that range. Ravine passed comments similar to me that he did to you, that they try and keep it to the low end of the range. So that would be for information, and that may be useful for you in terms of all understanding current practice. You've also got before you two or proposed resolutions. One talks to whether you would support consultation with the local community, and the other one has been modified slightly and it talks to whether there's an opportunity for you to request an update on whether the Director General of Health is going to make decisions around fluoride at the New Zealand level as opposed to the local council level, and that was the remit of Local Government New Zealand. So I suspect those three things don't require, the first one is a for information report. The second one would be a letter to the Minister of Health and the Director General of Health. The third one is whether you wish to engage and consult with the community around a change to the Onehunga water supply, and that's probably where I'd put my focus.
Okay, Councillor Quacks, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you,